Oh, and welcome to Voices of Leadership. Leadership today is not just about having the best strategy or the loudest voice. More and more, it's about creating connections in a world that feels increasingly disconnected. The leaders who stand out are the ones who know how to bring people together around ideas, purpose, and community. They create spaces where people feel energized to contribute, challenge each other, and grow together. And that's really the heart of the E3 leadership code, helping leaders to understand how to express, engage, and execute, all powered by emotional qualities. All of this is why I'm so excited about our guest today. Our guest is someone I've gotten to know through DisruptHR Princeton over a year ago, first as a speaker and now serving alongside him on the board. Marty Ott is the president of DisruptHR Princeton 2.0 and the founder of the Princeton Advisory Group. What I appreciate most about Marty is that he understands leadership is not just about building businesses. It's about building momentum, relationships, and communities that help people think differently and move forward together. He's someone who has stepped out to build something on his own while also investing heavily in others through connection and helping them grow. Marty, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I kind of remember when I first met you last year, we were having such a great time getting to know each other through the event. And I remember you're like, we have to go. Otherwise, we're going to be having breakfast together because the event just kept going.
When is the last time, this is what we do at DisruptHR Princeton. When is the last time that you've had to actually kick people out of an HR event? That's saying something, right?
You know you've done the right thing.
We're on to something here if that's what we're building.
I agree. So Marty, first, why don't you introduce yourself? Do a better job than I did, but tell us about your journey and how did you get here? Because you've now started a new business, you've started DisruptHR, and you're really making a splash. And so tell our audience a little bit more. And by the way, before we get started, please feel free to let us know where you're calling in from. Feel free to share your LinkedIn so people can connect with you. This is a good opportunity to network and ask us questions. Marty and I love to answer questions. So excellent. Over to you, Marty.
All right. So first off, I love the word journey, right? It's like you feel like you're in like Lord of the Rings or something like that. But when I think back, my journey really has been a combination of ambition and pressure, and then growth and self-discovery on one side. So a lot of my drive really started when I was young. I had parents that had really high expectations. Can you hear me okay with the audio?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, and I almost learned at a young age that I'm not going to say love because that's really dark, but I'm going to say approval, right? So growing up as a kid, I kind of realized that, approval from my parents became kind of performative. Wah, wah, but there's a good part of that because the kid that's under intense pressure ends up building something beautiful and being interviewed by Kathy Eastwood. So it all ends well. But really as a kid and having that on me, it really drove me to excel. When I was young, I was in all the gifted classes, pupil enrichment program, all that stuff. Like if you go to James A. Garfield grade school in Collingswood, there's like a plaque, with my name on it that's still there. And I'm saying this to parents, do not put your children under that intense scrutiny. I'm kidding. But, the path of performance from a child really worked all throughout the traditional path of achievement. Like I did Division I athletics. I was a Division I baseball player, NBA, Wharton, the whole nine. And a lot of my identity was really tied to performance and tied to, proving myself. So I always had a lot of success from an individual performance standpoint. And honestly, Kathy, like I really didn't want to be a leader. Like in my opinion, I don't like variables. And I think with people are messy. I'm messy. I think there's a lot of variables with people. So I started my leadership journey really as a result of me wanting to build something, which I love. I always knew that I wanted to build organizations, communities, and the stretch for me with building was surrounding myself with people that would support my vision. And, as I started to do this, I realized quickly that leadership is much more important than, it's not about credentials. It's not about even outcomes. I realize if, the leaders are at the bottom of the totem pole. It's not a glamorous position. You're getting, there's no glamour in leadership. You're always supporting everyone. You're always having everything on your shoulders all the time. And really, the moments that really shaped me from a leadership standpoint are not execution. It's actually times where I was forced, I'm using the word forced, to be more self-aware, more authentic, and more intentional about how I lead people. And that was the growth of this that I wasn't expecting. And I'm going to plug your book, the E3 Leadership Code, because it really resonated with me. Being a new leader, I kind of was looking for blueprints that I could follow. And E3 is, express, engage, execute. I think my mentality with leadership when it started was all about focusing on execution. If I focus on execution, everyone knows I have my shit together, everyone's going to follow me, and everyone's going to trust me. However, it was really the emotional qualities that were underneath all of that, like awareness, authenticity, courage, empathy. Those are what I found actually build and sustain my leadership over time. That was a huge moment for me.
Yeah, and I think Marty, like because you are an overperformer, right? You're an overachiever. You and I think we're very similar in that and how we grew up. I think for me as well, it was learning like you want to just get it done. You want to get at all costs we can get things done. But I think it's that balance that you've really been able to find, right? Of leadership is still about building relationships. It's about
Yes.
getting to know people. It's being able to build a community. So when you think about, that you're built Disrupt HR, you're building your own business now, right? With the Princeton Advisory Group, you're really building some big things. When you think about the community, how important is it with that community? So leadership is one part of it because that's how you attract people. But how do you see the people side of it and the importance of that as you start to build these new groups?
So I think building a community, people tend to like look at building community and building businesses in separate, veins. I think it's very similar. What I realized with Disrupt HR Princeton is we're able to build a community and be able to, service that community from a business standpoint. I think that's a big miss for a lot of leaders in separating them and siloing them.
Yeah, I agree. And when you go back to the code, you talked a little bit about it. So you have this vision, right, of what you want to do and you want to build. Let's stick with Disrupt HR for a second. You had this vision, and that you express that vision to yourself, to your community, to your close constituents, right? When some of our board is on with us here,
Yes.
right? Of saying, here's what I would love to do. We've got Justine's on there. I see Melissa. It really is, you have this vision and you expressed it very clearly to all of us, but your leadership is really about, it's contagious, first of all, right? Your excitement is, you're like, yes, I want to be part of this. Was that always natural for you? Like, I know you were an achiever, but was it building those relationships natural as well?
Yes. And the more I stopped thinking about leadership, I think with leadership, it's like an identity, right? Like you get the title, you're in corporate America, you feel like you have to act a certain way. The more I stopped thinking about being a leader and I was just myself, my imperfect self, that's when, I noticed that the group really started to trust me and really started to value my leadership. I think great leaders can create an emotional buy-in before the operational buy-in. And I think that's something that came natural to me because people want to support what they feel that they're connected to, and I think a good leader can make people feel ownership, purpose, and belief in their mission. And sometimes you have to have that belief before it's actually on paper and on true.
And we talked a lot when we were at the Disrupt HR event, this last one, about AI technology. In your opinion, where do you see that going? Do you see the human connection continuing to be more important as we move forward in this digital age?
Absolutely. And I think even having Disrupt and, my goal for Disrupt in general is to provide a space where people can be authentic. I think everything that we're looking to do will filter on through that. I think people are starving. I know I am for authenticity. I think people are starving for real human connection. We have technology, we have communication, all this information. And I think that people are more isolated than ever, personally and professionally. And, a lot of business environments are feeling like highly transactional. I wanted to go the complete opposite spectrum with Disrupt HR. Even having an environment where people can come together and share ideas and be in person, that in and of itself, I think is a huge contribution that we're making as a group.
Yeah, I agree. And when you think about, being authentic, and you mentioned that you realized that it was okay, I can bring my messy self to the table. How difficult was that for you to be honest with yourself and be aware and be vulnerable? Because I mean, fundamentally, that's what you were willing to do.
Yes. Extremely hard. Like if you look, all right, so I shared some about my upbringing. If you think about my pathology, right? When you tie your self-worth or if you tie love or valuation, whatever, whether it's your childhood or a relationship or anything, you tend to err on the side of that you have to be perfect, right? Because if you show that you're not perfect, that could mean that, love can pull away, relationships can pull away. It's a tough thing to deal with from a pathology standpoint. So for me, I surrounded myself with really successful, like our board. I'm honored to work with all of you. It's like I couldn't have dreamed of being able to work with such successful people. So coming into this and not really having a background where I know how to put an event, I knew that I was going to have to get vulnerable with everyone because I knew I didn't know everything. I don't have the skill sets to be able to build an event from lighting and theater and all that. I don't know how to do any of that. That was really difficult for me. I think because I always, hold myself at very high, accountability and perfection. For me, even to start getting vulnerable was tough. Interestingly enough, the more I shared my vulnerability and the more I was honest with my team about my own growth, about concerns, the trust actually became a lot stronger with everyone. And I think, that's a huge miss in corporate America. Leaders focus so much on execution, but they don't have the emotional buy-in that comes before that. If you think about yourself in corporate America, you have no detachment to anyone you work with. You have no detachment to your leader. And then they're showing up with an Excel spreadsheet and they're trying to judge who who you are as a person. So for me, I think setting that tone of it's okay to be imperfect kind of built a culture where we were all really honest with each other. And it was beautiful. It really was. I think it contributed a lot to all of the success we had working together as a team.
Yeah, being part of that team, I completely agree. And one of the things I often remember, and I coach others, is we all carry around fear, ego, uncertainty, and doubt. We're all carrying around our childhood promise, right? And good things, right? We
Yeah.
carry all this around. And if we don't provide that environment to express it and be able to share it, it just will hold us back. So when you learned, I think you were like, wait a minute, you lack confidence, Kath? And I'm like,
It
I
was. We
totally do.
talked about that. And the more we did that, the more everyone was open and honest. And the more we just started gelling as a group, and like I'm about as hard on myself as anyone, like I'm used to perfection. And I could say, honestly, as somebody that's very judgmental, like what we did on April 30th, it was perfection, in my opinion. And I'm a harsh judge. And like, honestly, like over the last 2 months, I've been thinking to myself, like, what happened? Even to prepare for this interview, I've been writing out, like, what did we do? Like, thinking about how we went from Melissa and I in January, we lost two board members, one of which had the entire skill set we put together for our event, to April 30th having what I would consider a flawless event. So even writing it out on paper and thinking about it has been, such a useful exercise. And what I realized is that I doubled down on my people skills. And I doubled down a lot on like looking within inside myself of who I am as a person and who I want to be as a leader. And it resonated throughout the whole team. I got to know everyone better and we just gelled. I mean, we just got so tight as a group, which means that the level of execution we were able to bring going into the event was fantastic. We all trusted each other. We all loved each other. It was great. And I think when we had our event, it all came to fruition.
I agree. And Marty, you're sharing a lot of different things about leadership, the self reflection, your self awareness on this. Rohit actually had a question, and I have my own opinion, but I'd love to hear yours because of this journey you've been on. What do you think is the most important quality that makes a great leader?
I would say vulnerability is very important. I would say vision, you know. So when you like the E3 leadership code express, right? You have to be comfortable expressing a vision out loud and internalizing a vision and being very specific with what you want before it happens, which is very tough to do. Like I think so many people like wait on validation and wait on, perfection to talk about what they want to execute. With leadership, it doesn't work that way. You almost have to be very clear with your vision before any of it is real. That to me, I think, coming into this in January, really being stripped and bare boned to where we are now, I think having that vision in my head is what got us from point A to point B. And that to me was the most important, starting off that way, expressing what I want to accomplish out loud in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That is one of the most important things. But I think it's everything that you've talked about. I don't think there's one specific thing for a great leader. I think it is about the balance, right? It is about you have to express that end vision. You have to engage your people. You talked about that, right? Connecting to the hearts of your team to make that happen, to get us excited, to be on board, to buy into your vision, right? And be like,
Yeah.
yes, I want to be part of that, right? And then, but it is execution, right? So, it's, I think for leaders is thinking about which space is your natural tendency and
Mhm.
then make sure you balance the other three. Right. So thanks, Rohit, for that question. A great question. We got another one, Marty, another question that I think is
Sure.
really good, especially when we think about the event that we just had and all of the great speakers we had challenging us. What do you see as a leadership trend that's widely discussed, but often misapplied in the real world teams? So if you think about this, and we had a lot of great speakers talking about um, the change that everyone's going through. We had the speakers talking about well-being. So what do you think? What did you take away and see as one of the leadership's team trends that just isn't really landing yet with teams?
Hmm. Um, can you give me some examples?
Yeah. So I was just thinking I jump in here. I think one of them that, I think for me, I think there is a trend that people think performance at all cost. We have to perform, we have to deliver, um, or people think we have to take care of our people, right? And I think that's where performance at all cost or people at all cost, I think are the trends, and that's not really happening. Either isn't happening well. That's the way I look at
No.
it with the real teams. Um, and I think we've got to figure out personally how to apply both simultaneously.
I would say in corporate America and in terms of leadership, I think one of the big things absolutely that I've seen just being in a business development environment, like a really high stakes, business development capacity is there's an overemphasis on execution without the emotional buy-in. And I talked about that before. To me, focusing on the metrics and focusing on execution without focusing on your people, that's a huge miss. You see that a lot in corporate America, especially in business.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people want to do the right things. So what are some things? So, Marty, you've got the vision now. You've got the community you're building. Um, what are some of the things that you think about to keep that momentum going? Because it's one thing to have the ideas, it's another thing to build a team, but it doesn't stop there, right? That's good
No.
intention. What are some things you do to help yourself on a regular basis to go back and make sure you're focused on the right things?
So number one, what I realize is that, visions are fluid. Visions are always changing. Um, and I think it's important that as they change, we need to get a pulse of who's involved in the vision, what's important to them, and also where you're looking to go as an organization, getting everyone's feedback and buy-in, and then being clear with everyone and explaining, where things are going to go. Like right now, candidly, with Disrupt, a lot of what we're looking to do is really trailblazing, and it's not been done with other disrupt organizations. And my vision for us now is to really take Disrupt HR Princeton as a brand and kind of build it into an ecosystem for HR outside of the typical, event-based business model. Um, and with that comes a whole other area of the complexities, which I'm excited about because when you build, these are things that, as you evolve, are exciting to be a part of.
Yeah. And how do you see that? What are some things, if you can share with the audience, what are some of those things you're most excited about?
Um, Building the community. I think we've shown that we can have an amazing event. We've shown that we can create magic. And I think when we build community and when we surround ourselves with people, it's going to evolve from an amazing event into a movement, and that's what I'm most excited about as we move forward.
So, Marty, there's a lot of people on this call that I think will say, yeah, it's great to have the emotional qualities, but, I work in an environment that doesn't cultivate that, right? The culture is not there. What is some advice, like when you think about this awareness that you've really been driving and coming to fruition? What advice would you have for people if they feel like they're in an environment that it's not safe to be yourself?
Get outside of work. Take your team to dinner. You will learn more about people. You will learn more about their motives. You will learn more about their family. You will learn more about their pathology. You will learn more about what, you have your organizational goals, but people also have their individual goals. And I think when you get to know people outside of work, you understand how their personal vision fits into your organizational vision. That's extremely helpful. I don't see that enough outside of like, you know, a cake party at work for somebody's birthday, which are always like super depressing. Everyone's sitting around that they don't really know each other, eating a cake for somebody's birthday, or like a happy hour. I think you really need to get out and do like a dinner or have conversations outside of the work spectrum and get to know the people that you lead and get to know the people that you work with.
Yeah. And I think that's so important when we think about it is, it's okay to bring your heart to work. And that's something for me. I remember the first time I put a presentation up with a heart on it. And it was the CEO. He's like, you just put a heart on a slide and you're putting that up. And I'm like, I am. And he's like, I don't know if we can do that. And I'm like, why not? We're all human. We're all here. And, we spend more than a third of our life in the office, right? And with work colleagues. So why not bring our full self there? Because it does truly make a difference.
Absolutely.
And when you think about it, so this transition you've gone for, I'm going to go get it all done and focus and a bit of control, right? That's you and I have the same nature of wanting to get things done. Have you found that people step up more when you're able to give them that space?
For a control freak like me, that has always been extremely successful on an individual level. And this came from a post of yours that I read on, and I told you about this on LinkedIn, is that when I let the rope go and I pulled back, I noticed that my team functioned so much better because everyone at that point, we kind of built the house. When I stepped back, everything flowed much better. And you have to have great people and you have to trust your team and you have to set those expectations. But once you're there, there's nothing wrong as a leader of stepping back. If you trust your people, they will do a great job. Even if they're, organizations where, Disrupt HR, it's not a corporate environment where people are getting paid, and the execution on every level was fantastic. So don't be afraid to trust your team and step back.
Yeah. And I think when you are in that environment, it's harder to lead people through influence than direct control.
Yes.
But when you can learn that ability to influence rather than control, it really does open up a huge amount of doors and people want to do more, right, Marty? Like it's not just the bare minimum. Tell me what to do. Okay, done. What next? That's exhausting as a leader to be constantly, okay, go do this. Oh, go do that. Because then you become the bottleneck and all of that.
Exactly. Absolutely. And, once we got as a team, it was fantastic. I mean, I almost felt at some points that I was like, well, what do you guys want me to do? Because everything was just so fluid and everyone was communicating so well, so beautiful. Stepping back and trusting your team can be a great thing, and they will step up for you, especially if they love and trust you.
Yeah. Agreed. And Marty, you used the word numerous times throughout our conversation today, which I love, and it's trust. You know, when you build trust, you build a team, you build a community, and you drive success that way from the human first approach. Okay, Marty. Well, believe it or not, we're at the bottom of the hour. So any last bits of advice you have for leaders out there hearing that the importance of being authentic, hearing the importance of trust, of any suggestions you have for them of how to take the next step and what they can do differently?
Okay, this is going to be controversial, but don't be afraid to tell your team that you love them, which I do. And what I would say, it's probably an HR violation in 13 states, but don't be afraid to do that, and don't be afraid to brush up on your people skills, because being vulnerable, being authentic will significantly increase productivity with your team.
You know, thank you for that. And being a member of your team, Marty, and you saying those things and doing those things, it does get me up every day, excited for what you're building, to be part of that, to build that community. And it does absolutely make a huge difference. So thank you for setting that example. Thank you for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it. If you are not familiar with DisruptHR Princeton 2.0, please reach out. I'll ask Imelda to put it in the show notes so that you can connect with us and be part of. We're having the next event is coming in October.
October
Correct.
22nd. Put it on your calendar. The public demanded it, and we're executing.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Also, if you want to learn more about the E3 Leadership Code and how to really have a human approach to high performance, you can learn more about the book on the website, kathyeastwood.com. And also continue to follow us for ideas. And we thank you all for joining us. Have a great one.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, Marty.
Bye.